Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dennae Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. On the podcast with us today is Arthur Carmazzi. Arthur, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here, Dan and Dennae.
Yes, thank you for sitting down with us and talking for a few minutes. And we'd like for you to get us started by talking a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur and where your current focus is.
Wow. Well, let's see. My background as an entrepreneur, I basically began from failure, as many entrepreneurs do, and on a number of occasions. But I guess, my biggest failure was, getting $500,000 in debt and then needing to get a job and then being in a situation where the job was, essentially not really very fun. And so I wanted to fix it. And so I kind of found some ways to do that. And then I kind of started writing about it, then got on radio, got on TV. And then, my entrepreneurial journey from there kind of developed to where I am today.
I want you to talk to us a little bit about a tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur. That I like to start off with one that I call the sore thumb tough decision. So it's a tough decision that you had to face, and it didn't have the outcome you were expecting, and it was actually in a negative or in a bad light. But you learned a lot of lessons through it. So you might have changed kind of what you're doing now. So talking to us a little bit about some of the lessons you learned through it.
I guess one of the toughest decisions that I made was going against my wife's wishes and hiring a friend to work for me at a rather high salary. And then my wife turned out to be totally right. And the whole thing turned out to be a fiasco.
Well, what are some of the lessons that you learned through that?
Well, number one, listen to your wife. Number two was, anytime you're hiring a friend, you obviously, have the relationship there. And the relationship that you have with friends becomes very different when you have a relationship when it requires accountability in an organization. And you think that, we're friends, we understand. And sometimes, it just didn't. And that was towards the beginning of, what we've developed. And, just to give you a little bit of background, right now we are in 18 different countries with over 400 licensees that use the Directive Communication psychology to develop organizations through consulting and training. And when we were first starting out, the gentleman that I had brought in, he was in a situation where, he was like going to, bring us up and, and help us to do all of this stuff online and everything else. And it was great for the first 3 months. It's just, after that, it became like, hey, why are you kind of like treating me like a boss? And it became a situation where you have to choose between friendship and actual profit. And then it became, it just became difficult and unpleasant. And so I can't say don't ever hire a friend, but I can say that, you really have to look at it from a perspective of understanding what you're getting into and what everybody's getting into when you hire people. And since then, I've been very, very, very careful in the way that we hire people. And we have created this whole process that identifies fit that eventually also became part of what we do for organizations when we do these culture change processes.
I'm just, thinking about the whole hiring friends and, family and that kind of dynamic. And I look at that kind of hire and I go, it is either one way or the other, it's either going to be really good or it's going to be really bad.
Exactly. And but the good thing, again, that came out of it was because of that situation, we came up with, a process, even for that matter, of really hiring people. And we don't hire people on an individual basis anymore. The first thing we do for even vetting people is we do group interviews. Then we separate them into groups and have them play these different games. And then we observe them to see, first of all, how what we call the access leader. So sometimes, somebody will take a leadership role in the group, even though they don't know it. And so these people become the A-list, and then we go from there.
That is interesting. I've never heard of that as a part of a hiring process, but I really like that because I can see how it would allow you to identify the way people interact naturally, as opposed to, sitting there and interviewing them and having their stock canned answers that they give. And that's one of the things we've done with our hiring process, is trying to figure out who people really are, because I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, it is. And, we've got a few other things like we play individually. So we play this card game. So we have these cards called CBC cards, or colored brain communication cards, that we developed. And by just asking people like one question, what would you do with $10 million, and choose 5 cards that best describe that, the cards they choose identify their primary motivators. And if at least one of their primary motivators is not the one that we feel is essentially the main focus of our organization, they don't get hired.
Interesting.
Well, let's shift here and talk about a different tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur that had a really good and positive outcome, and some of the lessons you learned through that.
Well, okay, in this particular case, we actually had a developer on staff that he was absolutely brilliant. And in this particular case, he literally had developed a whole bunch of the tools that we have online and everything else. And so he was basically indispensable. This guy had, put everything together and everything else. And because he was indispensable, he kind of eventually started to figure that out. And then he'd start coming late, and then he'd start leaving early, and then he just kind of disappear in the middle of the day sometimes. And this was affecting our organizational culture. So here was the decision. Fire a guy that is literally indispensable, where you'll have to spend lots of money to, restart everything and figure things out again, or have an issue where people are going to start seeing this and saying, hey, if he can get away with it, I can too. And so we ended up firing him. So it was an extremely difficult decision, but it was one that really worked out, because even though we did have to spend the money, it really saved our organizational culture. And the culture element essentially is the foundation of our profitability. All of the other stuff you can hire people to do, but the culture is the foundation that really keeps everything together and keeps everything working.
Culture right now is a very popular and kind of, sexy word that's being used quite a bit. How would you define culture in a business?
Well, we were doing this before it was a sexy word, actually. People didn't know what we were talking about. And essentially, culture is the foundation of how people react, make decisions, and basically feel in a group when working towards, ideally, unified objectives.
Can you talk a little bit about the strategies that you use when you are facing a tough decision?
Well, one of the key things is never do it alone. For example, if you've done any research on me, some of the research I've done is based on how people get clarity. So that is called the brain's ambiguity relief process, and it's a genetic process. So one of the key factors is that when people do make decisions, they're making it based on their own process of getting clarity. So that means that you're literally looking through colored glasses when you're making a decision. And well, it's not necessarily going to be the best way. So, you'll have these situations where you'll notice that some people just kind of get on your nerves, and you don't really understand why, because they just do things in such a different way than you do. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, how can they possibly be like that? And oftentimes we're what we call brain racist towards people. And because if you understand how that genetic foundation is working, how they need certain things to really get clarity, and then you kind of connect with these people, and then you have a much, much better perspective from multiple sides on making any kind of a decision. So you've got different ways of getting clarity to give you a broader perspective in any kind of a decision.
So, Arthur, just for my own clarity, what is the name of that process again? It was the ambiguity relief. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the scientific version is the brain's ambiguity relief process. We've designed a tool called the Colored Brain, and this is basically it identifies and measures the brain's ambiguity relief process so that you can identify how you get clarity and how that connects to other people around you and your team to basically improve synergy.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and hear from one of our show sponsors. When we come back, we'll talk to Arthur about some of his favorites as it relates to his life as an entrepreneur.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. All right, we are back and we're talking with Arthur Carmazzi, and we are going to go through a series of quick questions and answers that we call the trifecta. And the first question is, what's your most favorite technology that you use in business that helps make your life easier every day?
My favorite technology. Wow. Well, that would probably be an app called Squadly, because it helps us to measure things. I mean, literally get instant measurement, easy to use, really fast, and it keeps track of everything. So, I mean, it's like Facebook for teams. How you are when you're on Facebook or Instagram, and you always want to check your likes and all this stuff. So this basically gamifies performance.
What's a favorite quote that you have heard that has helped you as an entrepreneur?
Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. And that was by Albert Einstein.
And what is a favorite book that you've read that has helped you with your decision-making?
Wow, book with decision-making. There's so many of them. I guess one of the ones that helps me to kind of make decisions, there's a book, and it's an old book. It's called Hook, Spin, Buzz. And it basically shows you all of the different things that essentially are influencing you or how to influence people to buy stuff and or do things. But if you actually look at all of the psychology behind it, you understand what your triggers are when you're making decisions. And if you understand what your triggers are, you end up creating a situation where you have a better perspective or basically, you're not easily tricked when you're making a decision.
So what's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
The next thing for me is expanding to the United States.
And how can the listeners reach out to you if they want to contact you and follow you more?
Well, you can go to YouTube because there's a lot of stuff on there, and there's it's youtube.com/Carmazzi TV. Carmazzi is CARMAZZI, and then TV. And the other way would be to look up. You just go to carmazzi.net, and there's a lot of stuff on there as well.
And we'll make sure that we put all of those references and links on our website at toughdecisions.net, which is where all the show notes can be found. Arthur, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us here today. Looking forward to continuing to follow you as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur, and looking forward to having you on a future episode as well.
Absolutely my pleasure, Dan, and thank you very much, Dennae.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.